So I am Nancy Norris, Senior Director, ESG and Digital Trust. I believe most of you on the call probably know who I am. Been leading this project for the last year and have been working on it for close to 2 years now. And it's my absolute privilege to be working on this project. It's a real dream project for me. We have got an amazing team, and we've been piloting the use of digital trust technology in the energy and mining space for the past year, and building out additional functionality on the to augment the wonderful work that John Jordan and his team at the Office of the Chief Information Officer of British Columbia have been championing and contributing to the open source world for many years. So I will be introducing Kyle in a minute, who will be walking us through all of the work that the team has done on the technology side of this project. But I have a few opening slides just to set the stage, so we can move to that. So Energy and Mines Digital Trust, the purpose of this project is to test out the use of digital trust technology with the overarching goal of allowing BC energy and mining companies to prove out where their products come from and the sustainable way in which they are produced. So we are building out, both on the technology side and on the ecosystem side, a network of different actors who are able to exchange data about the sustainable performance of BC mines and energy operators. Can head to the next slide. And this is the pilot on a slide. This is the all of the different folks who we've had the privilege of working with over the last year. The way this slide reads, I'm sure it's familiar to most people, so I won't do a deep dive into it, but the legend on the left shows the digital credentials that we have been working on with stakeholders over the past year to create governance documentation around. And the bottom part of the legend is all of the different technologies that different stakeholders are using. We've really tried to focus on interoperability. We are building in the open source world, and that has definitely been a big part of the success of the project. So you can see this network that's forming of different actors, so government regulators, industry participants, markets, different industry associations, and creators of sustainable and performance certification for both on the energy and mining side, and allowing and enabling these different actors to exchange information in a way that's very trusted and very secure. That is the overarching goal of the project, and this is where we've gotten to over the course of the last year. So for the next, we can head to the next slide. Yeah, so I will pass it over to Kyle Robinson. He is the Senior Strategic Advisor on this project and just has brought a wealth of knowledge and drive and passion to the work. We absolutely would not be where we're at without Kyle's contributions, and can't say enough wonderful things about working with him. So thank you so much, Kyle, and I will pass the floor over to you.
Thanks, Nancy. So in this session, we want to talk a little bit more about traction. One of the portions that we did over this last year was to actually build out some technology to support the use cases in the energy and mining space. And so we had a small development team on our side working in an open source capacity to build out what we call traction. Thanks to Matt Hall, who I noticed is on the call, for the nice name, Traction. It's still living on, so that's exciting. And as Nancy mentioned, one of the things with Traction is the enhanced interoperability. And so the interoperability uses, Traction uses protocols that are used by other tools as well. And in this case, it's Hyperledger Aries is sort of the main umbrella protocol that we talk about for the what it uses. And that allows us to interoperate with other solutions that also use Hyperledger Aries, even though the front end might be a little bit different. So we worked closely with Northern Block and Spherity. I've got another slide on that. They are interoperable tools as well. The next thing about Traction is its multi-tenant capacity. And so the multi-tenant capacity is, the idea of that is where you can have a single hosted instance and you can have multiple sort of accounts within that instance. So it allows there to be multiple wallets inside that single instance used by many different users or organizations in this case. And it allows there to be a lighter overhead for the maintenance of the system. We have an innkeeper component to Traction, and that's the tool that's used to manage all of those tenants. The collaborative refinement, we worked with our stakeholders and our partners sort of throughout the year to continually refine in an agile way the user interface and the things that we needed. We even took it all the way down. We broke down the APIs that were used in the front end, and we broke them all down into actually be plugins on top of the main Aries component called Akapi, which is the Aries Cloud Agent written in Python, also an open source tool. We still maintain that it's an API first architecture. And the reason for that is so that you don't necessarily have to use the user interface of Traction to do the transactions, but you can integrate it directly into any line of business system that can do RESTful API integrations. And overall, with all of this, it allows for a safer data exchange. It follows a self-sovereign identity model, even though Traction is on top of a cloud-based solution. It supports the self-sovereign type of solution, interacts with mobile wallet solutions that also use the same protocol of Aries. So that's Traction in a bit of a nutshell. Just to go a little bit further on the interoperability, it uses Hyperledger Aries, which is open source code. And so on any other solution that's also using Hyperledger Aries, it can talk to it. And that's both for basic messaging type of functionality, as well as for issuing, holding, and verifying credentials. We're currently focused mostly on a non-creds type of credentials for those exchanges, but Hyperledger Aries and Akapi does support other, I believe W3C format credentials, and that's going to only expand in the actual protocols that it will support. And then those protocols, because Traction is built on that, will inherit those capabilities to either kind of build out those more protocols or just take advantage of the new features that are built into it. A couple of the partners that we worked with. So big shout out to Matthew Glode at Northern Block. So that's the NB Orbit solution. We did a lot of work through all of our use cases and a lot on the technology side as well, testing things back and forth, making sure that the interoperability works for our use cases, so that on the ecosystem diagram that you saw earlier, we can have partners using different solutions. Same thing with Spherity. That's a company based in Germany, and they have a similar solution also built on Hyperledger Aries to do exchanges. So the next thing to talk about with Traction is where it has ended up. What we've been doing, and Nancy mentioned this earlier, we've been working with the Ministry of Citizen Services and with the Hyperledger Foundation on traction. And so the development of traction was done over the last year in the EMDT space, the Energy Mines Digital Trust. So that's our project. And what we've actually done is we've just gone through a transition where the traction code base and the developers, honestly, go to citizen services. And so now the citizen services group is running with the further development of the traction code base, and also standing it up as a common service for BC government to be used by lots of different public sector organizations. So we take that as a big success for the EMDT space to have developed traction and then handed it off to, I would consider citizen services a larger group to carry it on and make it grow and expand even further. There's also continued work with Hyperledger Foundation. We aren't sure yet, but there is a potential where it could be traction code could be donated to the Hyperledger Foundation. That's something we've talked about a little bit, but we will continue that conversation kind of in the coming months. So I just wanted to show a couple screenshots of what the traction UI looks like, just to provide a bit of context. So on the left here, we see this is just the about page. So it shows the actual versions of the components that are being used in the traction interface. So we can see Akapai in here. We can see the traction version in here, and this is the actual instance. This screenshot was taken from a BC Gov dev instance, and so that's why we see the BC Gov logo there. But traction is open source, can be used by other jurisdictions or other companies if they're interested in using that code. Sorry, let me go back one. On the right-hand side, this is the screenshot from the Innkeeper with just some fun test names in here. So these are all the different tenants that we're running in that instance. There's actually a couple pages worth of them, but you can consider these all as organizational type wallets, cloud-based wallets that can be used. On this screen here, this is just a quick screenshot of credentials that have been issued. So think of this as the perspective from the issuer. This is their view into all the credentials that they have issued, to which contacts they've issued them to, their status, and when that was done. There's a little X icon here. This is a type of functionality to be able to revoke a credential that's been issued as well. You can see on the menu, there's some other functionalities for connections and invitations, issuance. This credentials is for credentials that are actually held by this wallet, and they're still building out future functionality for verification. I should note that the UI, the UI that we're looking at right now, is limited in the screens that have been built out. However, the APIs are all the full set of APIs that Akapai uses. So you can run verification processes. We just haven't built out the screens to view those verifications. On the far right-hand side here, this is just a little screenshot for the basic messaging chat that you can also do over DIDCOM for using the basic messaging protocol. So that can help in certain use cases. So over the past year, there's a few lessons that we've learned. The first one is the power of open source. And so just working in the open source community has been super valuable. There's been lots of collaboration, lots of help has come along. We've been able to use components that we were sort of already done. Just the collaboration and the working groups. So both with the Hyperledger Foundation and then also with Trust Over IP Foundation, that's where we've done a lot of our governance work. Not so much on the technical like coding side, but definitely with our use cases and the governance with Trust Over IP. So that's the wider open source community that we've loved being a part of and will continue to. Collaboration is key. So a lot of collaboration with the citizen services, with those open source organizations, also with our stakeholders. Stakeholders that in our ecosystem graphic have been excellent. working with them on all the different use cases and ideas and brainstorming. It's been very good. And the leadership, I'm going to let Nancy speak to the leadership point. Just to put you on the
Well,
spot.
yeah, no problem. I think with a project like this where we're piloting emerging technology and piloting it in a way that's perhaps a bit different or unique to what's gone before, you really need a leader and leadership that is committed and willing to take risks and kind of step out into the unknown a little bit. So our executive sponsor, Nate Ammon Blake, has been absolutely steadfast in supporting the project, allowing us to put really good people in place and create a vision and then work towards it, and be able to pivot in different directions as we need to. Because as we work with stakeholders and learn more about their needs and learn more from the open source community and the international community, international agencies that are focused on climate change and sustainability. We're just learning constantly about what's actually needed, what's actually going to add value, and where we can make a difference with the work that we're doing. So being able to have leadership that gives the latitude to make that happen, and allows the team to move in the direction that's going to be the most valuable for the largest number of stakeholders, is really key to this work.
Thank you. So one more slide here before we get to some Q&A. Going forward, as mentioned earlier, the traction component, and that's what we're focusing on today, is moving out of the Energy and Mines digital trust space, and it's moving into the Ministry of Citizen Services. And the overall program in Ministry of Citizen Services is called BC Digital Trust. And this is a brand new logo branding that we've put together. Energy and Mines Digital Trust will still continue on, but it'll be focused more on use cases and ecosystem building, whereas the traction component is strictly moving over to citizen services for, again, continued evolvement and the actual implementation of a hosted service for BC government as a wider group. That's all we had, but we did save some time for a few questions and answers. So I will stop sharing at this point.